What you're about to see on store shelves isn't a coincidence. It's a warning bell for the biggest retail shift America has ever seen. The canned foods you won't be able to find at Walmart after August 1st at today's prices. A quiet phase-out is about to happen right in front of your eyes. 15 essential pantry staples, from tomato soup to corned beef, the last line of defense for families on tight budgets, are being squeezed by 3 cost storms hitting all at once. As these affordable cans get reformulated, shrink in size, or disappear for good, you'll officially find yourself with nowhere left to turn. Don't wait until the shelves are completely empty before you panic. Take a close look at your shopping cart right now, because the rules of the game have completely changed. 15. Canned pumpkin. You walk past the canned goods aisle at Walmart in the middle of summer, see rows of canned pumpkin neatly lined up, and assume they'll always be there. But what surprises many people is that America's entire pumpkin pie season depends almost entirely on a single production chain. One harvest, one opportunity, one chance. Those 3 things determine whether millions of cans will make it onto Walmart shelves months later. Pumpkins aren't a crop that can be harvested year-round. Most canned pumpkin in the United States is grown in Illinois, which is also home to Libby's, the brand that has become a familiar name for most American families every Halloween and Thanksgiving. In just a few short weeks, the entire crop has to be harvested, delivered to processing plants, and sealed into the cans that will supply consumers for months afterward. The invisible villain here is the industry's near-total dependence on a single harvest. Once that harvest is over, the window to add more supply closes with it. If bad weather cuts production, manufacturers can't simply go back to the fields and grow another crop. They can only distribute what they've already produced across the entire market. That's why many families don't realize there's a problem until they actually need it. By the time they're getting ready to bake a traditional pumpkin pie for Halloween or Thanksgiving, the first empty spots have already started showing up on store shelves. Today, canned pumpkin prices across many parts of the United States are noticeably higher than they were 3 to 5 years ago. Even so, during the middle of the year, Walmart is usually still able to keep prices fairly stable thanks to inventory produced from the previous harvest and purchasing contracts that were locked in early. That's also why many shoppers haven't really felt the pressure building behind the scenes. If supply continues to come under pressure, the changes will happen very quietly. First, you'll notice fewer choices on the shelf. Then Walmart's private label products will take up more space, while holiday promotions gradually become less common. And when demand reaches its peak toward the end of the year, the price is usually the first thing to change, before shoppers ever see empty shelves. What determines whether that can is sitting on a Walmart shelf isn't the day you decide to buy it. It's a harvest that ended months ago. Have you ever gone shopping for canned pumpkin right before Halloween and discovered that the brand you always buy had suddenly disappeared? But pumpkin is only the beginning. The next item has to survive a much longer journey before it ever reaches a Walmart shelf. 14. Canned coconut milk. What makes a can of coconut milk travel halfway around the world before it shows up at Walmart? The answer lies in a supply chain that depends almost entirely on international trade. The United States can't produce this product on a commercial scale. Instead, nearly 100% of the coconut milk sold on American store shelves is imported, with Thailand supplying the largest share of the market. A small can worth just a few dollars travels farther than your car does in an entire year. In this supply chain, distance is cost. Every can has to cross more than 8,000 miles of ocean, making it directly vulnerable to fluctuations in the US dollar and global shipping rates. According to Drury data, The World Container Index at one point surged from under $2,000 to more than $5,000 per 40-foot container because of geopolitical tensions along major shipping routes. When freight costs go up, those higher costs immediately flow through to retail prices. The biggest threat here is international logistics risk and tariffs. At Walmart, a standard can of coconut milk currently sells for about $1.80 to $2.80, depending on the brand. Transportation industry experts predict that if new import tariffs take effect, or shipping routes between Asia and the United States continue to face pressure, retail prices for imported canned goods could rise another 10% to 15% over the next 2 quarters. To respond, Walmart will quietly reduce smaller imported SKUs to make better use of shelf space, expand its great value private label products, and scale back promotional discounts. The next time you shop, you can see it for yourself by noticing how many fewer imported brands are on the shelf. What determines the price of a can of coconut milk isn't the liquid inside. It's the cost of the journey across the ocean. If you've ever noticed an everyday product suddenly getting more expensive after headlines about disruptions in global shipping, you've just seen the endpoint of the global logistics chain. But coconut milk still comes from a supply chain that operates year-round. The next product takes us into an even more stressful chapter, where a sudden export ban can throw America's entire kitchen into chaos. 13. Canned sweet potatoes. About 60% of America's sweet potatoes typically come from North Carolina, where production is concentrated in a handful of major farming counties. That number reflects one reality. The supply chain for one of America's traditional foods is being placed in a single basket. All it takes is one hurricane sweeping through North Carolina or one disrupted distribution route, and gaps can start appearing at a Walmart thousands of miles away. That concentration creates a butterfly effect. Changing weather in just a few counties on the East Coast can reduce the choices available on store shelves all the way on the West Coast. The biggest risk lies in that very concentration. When supply depends on one region, any local disruption can quickly spread into pressure across the entire country. That helps explain why sweet potatoes tend to react more sharply to changing weather conditions. There are simply too few major growing regions to make up the difference quickly when one area runs into trouble. After the difficult 2024 harvest, the average price of sweet potatoes in North Carolina rose from about $19.70 to $20.90 per hundredweight in 2025. Even so, production has since rebounded strongly. Higher costs don't necessarily mean widespread shortages, but the market can still become volatile if the next harvest faces another round of unfavorable weather. If supply tightens during the holiday season, the differences may first show up from one store to another. High-volume locations may get restocked faster, while smaller stores or those farther from distribution centers could see empty spaces for longer. The next time you visit Walmart, pay attention to whether there are fewer brands on the shelf, whether private label products take up more space, or whether empty canned goods sections have been replaced with frozen products. Sometimes what makes a can disappear from Walmart isn't that more people bought it. It's a storm that happened somewhere you've never even been. If you've ever had to change your holiday meal because you couldn't find the canned sweet potato brand you always buy, you've already seen the end of a supply chain pressure that began thousands of miles away in the fields. But even with those vulnerabilities, sweet potatoes are still grown and transported within the United States. The next item has to cross an ocean before it can ever reach a Walmart shelf. And there, the weather is only one of many risks. 12. Canned tomatoes. Many people think a can of tomatoes is the simplest product on the shelf, but it actually depends on a more complex network than most people realize. All it takes is one link in the chain to break, and America's entire food supply chain comes under pressure. That's because canned tomatoes aren't just a food product. They're a foundational ingredient in hundreds of meals, from pasta sauce and pizza to all kinds of soups. Most domestic production depends almost entirely on California's Central Valley, combined with large volumes of imports from Mexico. That concentration makes this product especially vulnerable to a double risk. Drought in California reduces crop quality, while rising energy costs at processing plants drive up the cost of canning. The biggest threat is that processing costs and climate risks are hitting at the same time on a product that already operates on very thin profit margins. Industry data shows that processing tomato prices in California have remained high at around $150 per ton. At Walmart, a standard can of crushed tomatoes currently sells for about $1.20 to $2.50. Experts predict that if irrigation and packaging costs continue to rise, retail prices could increase another 8% to 12% over the next 2 quarters. At Walmart, the signs show up clearly in the way the shelves are arranged. To keep price-sensitive shoppers coming back, the retailer will scale back promotions on major brands while expanding shelf space for its great value private label. The next time you stop by the canned goods aisle, take a look at whether great value tomato products are starting to take over the space once occupied by long-established brands. A can of tomatoes isn't just food. It's a barometer for the health of the entire food processing industry. If you start noticing that everyday canned tomato products are getting more expensive, that's a sign the pressure from the farm fields out west has made its way into your kitchen. But canned tomatoes still have domestic production helping support the supply. The next item takes us into an even more stressful scenario, where a sudden export ban from an Asian country could immediately leave store shelves across America empty. 11. Tomato soup. Many people walk down the grocery aisle believing the money they're spending is for the thick soup inside the can. But in reality, what is squeezing your wallet is the metal container around it. The packaging is becoming more expensive much faster than the food it holds. It reveals a hidden reality: dependence on heavy industry. A classic can of soup from brands like Campbell's is in many ways a product of the steel industry, requiring a steady supply of rolled steel and protective tin coating. When global steel supply chains run into trouble or the energy costs of manufacturing cans rise, packaging costs immediately climb. That pressure quietly spreads through the market like a chain reaction, affecting every can on the shelf. Production data shows that base metal prices continue to fluctuate. A standard can of soup currently sells for about $1.30 to $2.10. Experts predict that if raw material costs don't ease, retail prices for this category could increase another 7% to 10% in the coming months. On store shelves, the signs of tightening appear very subtly. Instead of seeing buy 3, get 1 free promotions during the winter, prices stay locked at higher levels, and holiday discounts suddenly disappear. Retailers will quietly move products with simpler packaging to the front of the shelf. You're paying more for the steel industry than for agriculture. If you notice that everyday tomato soup is no longer seeing deep discounts, that's the moment the pressure from the steel mills has finally reached your hands. 10. Canned chickpeas. The shelves stocked with grains may look calm, but shopper behavior has changed. A crop that was once overlooked has now become the center of a quiet shift happening across the United States. Consumer demand is moving faster than farms can keep up. Canned chickpeas have moved beyond the world of diet foods to become a go-to staple for the growing trend of meal prep at home. As beef and fresh pork prices have surged because of rising livestock production costs, millions of families have turned to affordable plant-based protein instead. That sudden shift has triggered an intense competition for supply. Consumption of plant-based protein continues to grow in urban areas, while domestic farmland can't be expanded after a single growing season. A can of chickpeas currently sells for about $1.10 to $1.90. Market reports forecast that retail prices could rise another 9% to 14% as the holiday shopping season approaches. The clearest sign you can see for yourself is in the product mix on the shelf. Major brands suddenly become harder to find or get pushed into less visible spots, making room for store-brand products. Larger package sizes disappear, replaced by smaller cans with slightly higher prices. What's driving up the price of this can isn't a natural disaster. It's the pressure from millions of shopping carts trying to escape soaring meat prices. The next time you go grocery shopping, if you notice long-established imported chickpea brands being replaced by unfamiliar names, you're watching one of the biggest shifts in consumer demand unfold right in front of you. 9. Canned black beans. Consumer data shows that sales of canned beans consistently move in the opposite direction of consumer confidence. When household budgets tighten, these simple cans suddenly become some of the most sought-after items on the shelf. Demand for black beans is surging as millions of families are forced to cut back on meat. That has turned this humble crop into one of the last affordable sources of protein, protecting household budgets. Canned black beans are a cornerstone of pantry storage because of their long shelf life and extremely low cost. As inflation squeezes household spending, people turn to the simplest alternative sources of protein. But the irony is that the more people try to save money, the greater the pressure on the supply chain for this very product. Right now, a can of black beans sells for about 90 cents to $1.60. Experts predict that price could rise another 8% to 12% over the next 2 quarters. At the grocery store, the clearest sign you can see for yourself is how quickly the shelves turn over. Store-brand black beans are constantly selling out, while bulk buy promotions have disappeared entirely. What's driving up the price of this can isn't a poor harvest, it's the weight of millions of households tightening their budgets. The next time you go shopping, if you notice stacks of canned black beans disappearing unusually fast, you're watching how Americans are defending themselves against rising food prices. 8. Canned sardines. What happens if a North African country changes its Atlantic fishing quotas? The answer shows up right in your shopping cart. Morocco is currently the world's largest exporter of sardines, controlling a major share of the global supply of this food. A single decision made in Rabat can immediately trigger a domino effect that stretches from the ocean to store shelves thousands of miles away. Canned sardines depend on a highly sensitive logistics chain, from fishing to transportation to processing plants, to packing in oil, and finally to export. When fuel costs for fishing fleets rise or the supply chain for metal cans runs into trouble, the global supply is immediately squeezed. The biggest risk is that the United States has almost no large domestic supply capable of making up the difference. A standard can of sardines currently sells for about $1.40 to $2.80. With pressure from ocean freight costs and Morocco's conservation fishing quotas, retail prices in the United States are expected to rise another 10% to 15% by the end of the year. The clearest sign will be the disappearance of imported North African brands, replaced by higher-priced domestic brands or smaller-sized products taking over shelf space. Whether this can is on the shelf isn't determined by your demand. It's determined by the size of a fishing catch half a world away. If you notice that your favorite canned sardines in oil have suddenly become more expensive, You're seeing the endpoint of a wave that began off the coast of North Africa. 7. Canned mackerel. The biggest irony of grocery shopping during inflation is that you think you found a smart way to save money, when in reality, you're just stepping into the next crowded line. As traditional canned tuna climbed to prices that were simply too high, a massive wave of shoppers turned away all at once, quietly triggering a shift toward canned mackerel. They thought they had discovered a money-saving secret, but in the marketplace, no secret stays hidden for long. Within just a few months, the cans that had quietly sat on the bottom shelf suddenly started disappearing faster than anyone expected. The villain here is herd mentality. When millions of households adopt the same budget-cutting strategy, inventory of the substitute product gets burned through at an incredible pace. Canneries can't suddenly ask fishing fleets to catch thousands of extra tons of mackerel overnight just to satisfy a new buying frenzy. A standard can of mackerel currently sells for about $1.60 to $2.90. Many experts believe that once a substitute product becomes too popular, it eventually suffers the same fate as the original, and the upward pressure on prices will continue. At grocery stores, you won't see signs saying the product is sold out. The clearest sign is the shrinking number of choices. Premium mackerel packed in olive oil disappears first, leaving behind only a few plain cans packed in brine. Retailers will reduce smaller SKUs to dedicate more shelf space to their private label products, forcing shoppers to spend more money for the same amount of food. The product that's helping you save money today becomes tomorrow's price target. The next time you go grocery shopping, if you see the tuna shelves fully stocked because no one is buying it while the mackerel shelves beside them are nearly empty, you'll understand what it looks like when consumer spending shifts in search of an escape. 6. Canned tuna. Many people walk into the grocery store, look at the towering shelves of canned tuna, and assume the supply is endless. But the biggest misconception is treating this household staple as a permanently safe choice, when in reality, it's the biggest domino in the entire market. Once this domino falls, consumers will officially have nowhere left to turn. That's because a product this large can't simply be replaced. Canned tuna is the backbone of affordable protein, found in American kitchens and sandwiches everywhere. When smaller products like sardines or mackerel become more expensive, consumer spending can shift toward tuna as a safe haven. But once that safe haven comes under pressure, the entire market loses its last place to absorb the demand. The villain here is complete dependence on a single dominant product. That also explains why every major shift in the tuna market is quickly followed by a new wave of price increases across nearly every other type of canned seafood on the shelf. When the fortress collapses, it crushes every alternative around it. A standard can of tuna currently sells for about $1.20 to $3.20, depending on the brand. Analysts predict that under continued pressure from global supply chains, this category could see prices rise another 8% to 15% over the next 2 quarters, forcing retailers to change the rules of the game. The changes won't happen as dramatically as rows of empty shelves. Instead, distributors will quietly phase out lower-priced solid tuna and replace it with lower-quality chunk tuna while keeping the same price. You'll notice shelf space for budget canned tuna shrinking significantly, making room for higher-priced, ready-to-eat tuna products. What you're buying is no longer just a can of fish. It's the price of the last remaining choice. But if a can of ocean-caught seafood can quietly change what's inside to hold the line on price, the next food item faces an even harsher biological battle right on America's domestic farms. 5. Canned salmon darkness still covers Alaska's fishing ports as boats prepare to head out into the freezing cold. The glow from the wheelhouse lights falls across empty bins of ice, ready for a race where humans don't get to make the rules. Wild salmon is a resource with an entirely finite supply. It follows one simple rule: higher quality means greater scarcity. No technology can force nature to produce more fish than the seasons allow. Once the short Pacific fishing season comes to an end, the door to that year's supply closes with it. The villain here is the strict limit imposed by the ecosystem itself. Right now, a can of wild sockeye salmon sells for about $4.50 to $7, while the more affordable pink salmon ranges from about $2.50 to $3.80. Experts predict that if conservation rules in Alaska continue tightening harvest quotas, retail prices in this category could rise another 12% to 15% over the next 2 quarters. On store shelves, the tightening shows up in the disappearance of mid-range products. You'll find the selection becoming increasingly polarized, with only inexpensive canned pink salmon on one end and premium products with much higher prices on the other. Deep discounts disappear, replaced by a limited display of private label products. What you're buying isn't just a can of fish. It's a piece of a natural harvest that can never be repeated. If you notice cans of wild Alaska salmon pushed onto the highest shelf and collecting dust because they've become too expensive, you'll know nature has just sent a warning straight to your wallet. 4. Canned chicken consumer spending data shows that canned chicken used to be the strongest safe haven for almost every household budget. But recent veterinary reports and agricultural market data are telling a very different story. What was once considered the cheapest dependable option is quietly building toward major price increases because of avian influenza and rising feed costs. It reveals one reality: yesterday's low prices don't guarantee tomorrow's. As fresh chicken prices climbed, millions of consumers shifted to canned chicken as a replacement. But that shift happened at the very same time America's poultry farms were being hit by disease outbreaks and soaring grain costs. The villain here is the fragility of the industrial poultry system. A can of chicken breast currently sells for about $1.80 to $3.50. Analysts predict that as broiler farms across the southern United States continue struggling to fully rebuild their flocks, retail prices for canned chicken will keep rising another 10% to 18% through the end of the year. The clearest sign you can see for yourself is the change in packaging. To avoid the shock of direct price increases, manufacturers will quietly reduce the net weight in each can through shrinkflation, or push multi-can value packs with a higher effective price per can than before. When the most affordable safe haven becomes more expensive, your household budget has officially lost its last line of defense. If you start noticing that canned chicken, once one of the most affordable items on the shelf, now makes you hesitate because of the price, you'll understand what it looks like when a mass production system reaches its breaking point. 3. Corned beef. What happens when one of the world's biggest beef-consuming countries suddenly runs short of its core supply? The answer is already playing out on retail shelves. America's cattle herd has fallen to its lowest level in decades. This is a biological crisis driven by natural production cycles, completely different from the shipping pressures affecting imported goods. The villain here is the time it takes to rebuild the herd. Unlike chickens or hogs, which take only a few months, a beef animal needs nearly 3 years from birth before it reaches the market. Historic droughts that scorched grazing land across the western United States forced ranchers to sell off even their breeding cows. Once the breeding foundation collapses, it can take an entire decade for the supply chain to repair the damage. This threat hits canned corned beef especially hard. The canned product, with one of the highest concentrations of whole cuts of beef. Right now, A standard can of corned beef sells for about $4.20 to $5.80, roughly 3 times the price of a can of canned pork. Experts predict retail prices in this category could rise another 12% to 15% over the next 2 quarters as beef supplies remain tight. The clearest sign on store shelves will be domestic brands disappearing, replaced by imports from South America with higher fat content to reduce production costs. What determines the price of this can isn't today's costs, it's the pace of nature itself. If you see an everyday can of corned beef selling for about the same price as a freshly prepared meal, you're witnessing the point where a supply chain has lost its ability to recover quickly. 2. Beef stew. The biggest irony of a can of beef stew is that shoppers usually focus only on the amount of beef inside, when in reality, this product is absorbing 3 major economic pressures all at once. This is one of the canned foods you won't be able to find at Walmart after August 1st at today's stable prices. If corned beef is pressured mainly by cattle supply, beef stew is where the canned food supply chain becomes its most complex. This product depends on beef from the livestock industry, vegetables from farms, large steel cans from the energy-intensive metal industry, and a heavy liquid-filled package that drives transportation costs much higher. The villain is the compounding effect. When every input cost rises at the same time, the profit margins on this large format product are squeezed from every direction. A large can of beef stew currently sells for about $2.80 to $4.50. Experts predict this category will be forced to increase prices another 10% to 16% before winter arrives. The clearest sign you can see for yourself is inside the can. To avoid shocking shoppers with a direct price increase, manufacturers can't reduce the size of the can because beef stew requires a large volume. Instead, they quietly change what's inside. The proportions of potatoes, carrots, and thick gravy increase, while the amount of real beef is reduced as much as possible. This can isn't becoming more expensive because of one isolated problem. It reflects the health of the entire logistics system. If, after that point, you notice a can of beef stew suddenly becoming thinner while costing more, you'll know that all 3 gears of the economy are grinding to a halt right there. 1. Canned beef. Many people look at it on the shelf and think it's just a can of beef. But the biggest misconception is treating it as just another emergency pantry item, when in reality, it's where nearly every major pressure we've talked about since the beginning of this video comes together. Look at a can of beef, and you can see the face of the entire supply chain behind it. This product is a miniature picture of the strain on America's food system. It faces a double burden from record-low cattle inventories, rising processing plant costs, mounting energy expenses in the packaging industry, and logistics costs that continue squeezing profit margins. As seafood and poultry become more expensive, waves of consumers stockpile canned beef as their last line of defense. The biggest villain is the combined pressure of the entire system. Right now, a can of beef is already expensive, selling for about $4.50 to $6.50. As defensive buying accelerates and cattle supplies remain at historic lows, experts predict prices could climb another 15% to 20% over the next 2 quarters. At Walmart, the warning signs appear in pallet spaces that can't be refilled and stricter purchase limits beginning to take effect. This is no longer the story of a single product. It's a warning for the entire food system. One by one, these 15 essential products have spoken. When this final wall of defense begins to shake, that's when you realize the system that feeds us every day no longer has anywhere left to retreat from the storm of rising prices. The 15 cans on grocery store shelves aren't just emergency food. They're barometers reflecting a system that's beginning to crack at its foundation. This storm didn't begin at the supermarket. It came together from drought-stricken pastures, depleted oceans, and steel mills growing cold. The system that feeds us is now operating with a level of vulnerability unlike anything we've seen before. As one affordable safe haven after another begins to disappear, the difference between mastering inflation and becoming its victim comes down to preparation, not following the crowd in panic. You can't make nature turn back, but you do have the power to rethink what's in your shopping cart before it's too late. The future of food security is already being reshaped in your own kitchen.